cooperation, which is the basis of shared services, is permitted under Article 5G of General Municipal Law. So it applies to all municipalities, whether it be counties, cities, towns, villages, or what have you. And it gives broad power for municipalities to work together to perform services amongst themselves on different bases. It is a very powerful statement, and one which is cited frequently in permitting shared services and local government cooperation. So I'd like to talk about shared services and what we mean by shared services, because they're not all the same. They run on a spectrum, okay? Now you got to pay attention to this because John is going to quiz you later. So they operate on a spectrum from easier to implement shared services agreements to more complex agreements, basically from cooperative agreements through shared services to functional consolidation. As we go along the arrow, we generate more savings, but they're also more complex to implement, okay? So when we talk about cooperative agreements, what we really mean is municipalities getting together individually to perform a specific service or function, okay? Usually it's done to reduce the cost of procurement. You probably understand the concept of economies of scale, and that's exactly what this is. The more buyers there are out there, the cheaper the price. A good example of a cooperative agreement is a healthcare consortium, okay? These are organized under Article 47 of state finance law, and they allow individual municipalities to work together to create a self-insurance healthcare system. Rather than relying on the big providers out there, they do it themselves. They both fund the healthcare consortium and the consortium pays out claims. Of course, there's a third-party administrator to do the background work, but basically costs are reduced by cutting up the middleman, I guess you could say here. Another good example of cooperative agreements are for shared facilities and equipment. Often you see this with highway services. Highway department will purchase an expensive piece of equipment, say a road paver, and will agree to share that piece of equipment with other municipalities, probably neighboring municipalities, okay? Often these are done with handshake agreements. We at Department of State don't really think that's a great idea. Any agreement among municipalities should be committed to paper. There should be a contract. And the reason for that is not only to specify the terms of the sharing and the cost, the price, but also to address liability issues, okay? Very important. And then, of course, the most obvious form of cooperative agreement is bulk purchasing. I know that the MEGA, is it M-E-G-A, Municipal Electric and Gas Alliance, enters into a lot of contracts in Western New York with municipalities. And the more municipalities that join, the cheaper the price you get on your energy. The second type of shared services are true shared services, which are basically sharing either a service or a project, infrastructure. A great example of this is sharing courts. Now, every town is required to have a court under New York law, but there's nothing to say that you can't share justices or courtroom facilities or anything like that. So each municipality does continue to provide court services, but they share resources. We also see a lot of this with water and wastewater services. It's tremendously expensive to implement your own water treatment plant or wastewater treatment plant. So sharing the cost, sharing the service among municipalities makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, the obvious shared service, which we hear a lot about because it's easy to do, is snow plowing. As you know, there are all different sorts of roadways, whether they're state highways, county, local, what have you. And to make the most efficient use of snow plowing equipment, it sometimes makes sense for a town to plow county roads or county to plow town roads. So you're not coming up to a roadway, lifting up the plow, crossing over and putting down the plow and going forward. That just doesn't make sense. So a lot of agreements are entered into among municipalities to share that service. And then at the top of the list in terms of complexity is what we call functional consolidation. And this is where one municipality provides the service exclusively so that the partner municipality no longer engages in that service. Okay, it's done on a purely contractual basis. We see this a lot with code enforcement and assessment, probably more with assessment than code enforcement, since municipalities like to be in control of code enforcement more so than assessment. Assessment is often not a full-time position, so assessors can be shared quite easily, or the assessment function can be outsourced to the county. So we're starting to see county-wide assessment done on a contractual basis such that local governments no longer engage in that service. We also see functional consolidation somewhat in highway services and departments. The problem here being that a lot of, if not most, highway superintendents are elected rather than appointed, and therefore to abolish a highway department requires a referendum. And it is not easily done. It's a separate budget, separate funds, as we all know. However, in the case of an appointed highway superintendent, consolidation can make a lot of sense. Roadway equipment is very expensive. There's a lot of wear and tear on it. It has to be replaced. Probably useful life no longer than 10 years or so for heavy equipment. And so it makes sense for one municipality to purchase the equipment and provide the service to a neighboring municipality, usually on a contractual basis. The neighboring municipality now no longer has a highway department. It contracts out highway services to its partner. Another area where we see a lot of functional consolidation is in police departments. Again, there are different levels of policing in this state. There are state police, there are county police, the sheriff's office, and often local police. And municipalities in an era of tight budgets are saying, do we really need 3 levels of policing? Maybe it makes sense, especially in a situation where, say, you have a village and a town with 2 separate police departments. Does it make sense to have that level of coverage? And most often it doesn't. Police departments consume a large part of municipal budgets, and consolidation can reduce those costs. And there are ancillary benefits as well. After all, a larger police department offers greater opportunity for advancement, for training, and ultimately for job fulfillment. So now we get to planning documents. How do you incorporate government efficiency into your planning documents? And when we think of planning documents, usually the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is the zoning code. After all, the zoning code sets out the land uses that a municipality wants to or will allow in specific areas of the geographic boundaries. But planning documents also usually or should include a financial plan, which is usually a 5-year forecast of revenues and expenditures for both the general fund and for enterprise funds such as sewer and water funds, transportation funds, what have you. As I say, a lot of municipalities do use it, but we would like to see more. It's a very important tool to use because it gives you a sense of where you're going. And a little later on in the presentation, I'll show you exactly what I mean. And then a third planning document is the capital investment plan. Large pieces of infrastructure or equipment eventually need repair and ongoing maintenance, and finally, replacement. And it's important to plan for these well in advance. It's understood clearly what the life cycle is and where the cash needs will be. So it makes all the sense in the world to reserve for these eventualities and have the cash available when necessary. However, all of these planning documents flow from the central document to planning, which is the comprehensive plan. Okay? Zoning flows from the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan should also address the financial future of the local government. This is a quote directly out of general municipal law. The comprehensive plan, which is also known as a general plan, master plan, or land use plan, is a document that's designed to guide the future actions of a community. It presents a vision for the future with long-range goals and objectives for, note, all activities that affect the local government. All activities, not just land use. A lot of people get confused between a comprehensive plan and a land use plan. They are not really the same. A comprehensive plan, by definition, is much broader than just land use. Okay, there we go. These are paragraphs right out of the law. The first paragraph obviously deals with land use, which is a central part of the comprehensive plan. But further down in the definitions, we notice that the wording does imply or does promote cooperation among governmental agencies, planning and implementing capital projects, and municipalities that may be directly affected thereby. It contemplates shared services. It contemplates efficiency. It contemplates regional rather than strictly local thinking. And this is important because, as we'll see, Language such as this can be incorporated directly into your comprehensive plan. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to take a look at what basically goes into a comprehensive plan, and then we'll look at an example of a comprehensive plan with this language. And I've chosen my own town simply because I am familiar with it, and I think has done a good job in incorporating the concept of government efficiency into the comprehensive plan. Okay, so at a minimum, a comprehensive plan must contain a description of existing conditions, and I think you're all familiar with this. It's demographic and socioeconomic trends and future projections to understand exactly what the assets are in a community and what the trends are for the future. Is the community growing? Is it shrinking? Is it doing better or worse? Also, it describes the location of important facilities or assets, whether they be public or private, and describes infrastructure as well as community emergency services and the like. The second part of a comprehensive plan is goals and objectives. This is where the desired outcomes for the future are listed. Then implementation. Usually this takes the form of a matrix showing which goals are going to be implemented, when, how, who's responsible, and so on. And I'll show you an example of this in a minute or two. And then, of course, the future land use map, which is self-explanatory. This is where we want growth to occur, growth not to occur, new facilities, so on and so forth. The planning process involves 3 steps, which are identifying goals or outcomes that we want to achieve for the community. Then defining objectives, which are the intentions to achieve those goals, and then finally actions, which are the deeds or the steps, individual tasks we must undertake in order to achieve those objectives. The responsibilities for developing the comprehensive plan are those developed by a steering committee, usually with the help of a consultant, depending on the complexity of the comprehensive plan. The steering committee is appointed by the governing board for the specific purpose of writing the comprehensive plan. And the steering committee should really include a broad array of persons representing the community at large. So it should include planning board members. In fact, I think there's a requirement that a comprehensive plan steering committee include at least, I think it's 2 planning board members, but it should also include stakeholders who are going to be affected directly by the comprehensive plan, and interested and involved citizens, always important. And the steering committee is responsible for presenting the comprehensive plan to the governing board for adoption. And that's where their responsibility ends. At all stages in developing the comprehensive plan, it's important to include a good degree of public participation. You've got to get the public involved. Otherwise, rumors start to spread and misinformation gets out there. The earlier the involvement, the better. A lot of comprehensive plans, for example, start with a survey, public survey, to gauge people's beliefs about the community, the positives, the negatives, what they want to see in the future, what they don't want to see in the future, and so on. It's a good idea to hold informational sessions from time to time. These are sometimes called town hall meetings, and discuss what's going on. And sometimes more focused public involvement is a good idea. For example, in design charrettes, where you get a focus group of people and they present their ideas to the steering committee in terms of different scenarios. Information should be made available to the public as much as possible. Steering committee meetings are by definition open meetings, and so the public is invited. They don't have to speak, but they are invited to attend and listen in. If you get the chance, use local news media, newspapers, radios, what have you, to publish information about the ongoing development of the comprehensive plan. And always a good idea to provide access to citizens to information. If you have a website, by all means, publish information on that website. It doesn't have to be a draft of the comprehensive plan until you get towards the end, but survey results, synopsis of a town hall meeting, whatever. And then, of course, at the end of the whole process, state law does require public hearings to be held in order to pass or adopt the comprehensive plan. All comprehensive plans begin with what's called a vision statement. And this is a statement of the way people want to see their community at some point in the future. Usually it's a 10 to 20 year time horizon. So, as I said earlier, I want to talk about my town's comprehensive plan. I live in a small town. It's called Town of Copiague, and it's in Columbia County, which is south of the capital, south of Albany. And it's a largely rural town, although it has a lot of second homeowners from New York City. So, it's probably representative of a lot of New York State communities. This comprehensive plan was developed over time. I think it was published in 2011. Yeah, 2011, if I recall. I was not involved in the development of the comprehensive plans, so none of this language that you'll see is my language. But I think it's very, prescient the way that the language in the comprehensive plan is worded. For example, the vision statement in the comprehensive plan, the desire for the future, states that the town grows in a logical, responsible manner and provides efficient basic life services, keeps tax burdens under control, and bears in mind the rights of our citizens. Okay, so that's an aspirational statement which directly incorporates the concept of efficiency. Doesn't really say how, but implies that efficiency is connected to tax burdens, which is true, and also the rights of citizens. So we'll see as we go through the various processes in developing the comprehensive plan, how this is directly incorporated into the plan. So after the vision statement are the goals, and there are myriad goals in our town's comprehensive plan, including preserving farmland, preserving scenic views, providing access for seniors to facilities, so on and so forth. But one explicit goal is to have an effective and efficient town government. So again, reading directly from the comprehensive plan, our government commits us to prudent management of a diversified tax base, fair property valuation, and efficient delivery of community services. It goes further to say the cost efficient delivery of vital community services is the core government function. Now, this is quite a strong statement, basically saying government must be efficient. It is your core function to deliver services to residents in the most cost-efficient manner. Related to keeping tax burdens under control. Okay, so that's a very powerful statement that's incorporated right into a goal in the comprehensive plan. Going further along with the process in identifying objectives, well, one objective would be to achieve the goal of an efficient town government, would be to share services, to control costs. Interestingly, there's a comment in there about addressing resident concerns about potential loss of autonomy. This is always a concern, I think, with sharing services, that somehow you lose control of the service if you're cooperating with another local government entity. I don't really see that. I don't really believe it. But nevertheless, it is a concern and it must be addressed. And then finally, the actions, specific actions or tasks that must be undertaken in order to reach those objectives. And here are some specific ideas. They want to consider consolidation in courts, in grant writing, in GIS, code enforcement, communication, and assessment, basically. So they've identified the specific areas to look at in terms of sharing services and achieving an efficient government. Surprisingly, there's a statement right at the end which goes even further and suggests that the town look at consolidation with adjacent towns. This is pretty far-reaching. Consolidation, we refer to as government reorganization. But for small towns with a high-cost government, perhaps it makes sense. Perhaps it should be considered. And I think it's very brave to put this in the comprehensive plan. Probably a lot of communities would not consider it, but hey, why not? They're not saying we should. They said we may benefit. Perhaps it should be studied. At the end of all of this, you get what's called an implementation matrix. Okay, I don't know if you've seen these, but it should be a part of any comprehensive plan where the goals are identified. In this case, the goal is the effective and efficient town government. The actions that are needed in order to achieve this goal. So I circled the top one, which is to look at the town police department and decide whether or not it's really needed. And to determine what some possible alternatives are. It also describes in the third column there, you can see Z's down there. That implies whether or not there's a zoning change that might be required. In this case, there's not. It doesn't have anything to do with zoning. There's a column for timing, whether it's short, medium, long term. Short usually means immediately. Medium, up to 5 years. Long term, 5 years, 10 years, longer. Who is responsible? The participants. In this case, it's the town's decision, the town board's decision, whether or not to proceed with abolishing the police department. And then the funding. Who pays for it? In this case, there's just no cost. It basically comes down to a referendum on keeping the police department or not. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about implementing government efficiency, how you can plan for it. in your own communities. Again, we go back to our planning documents, the zoning code, the financial plan, and the capital investment plan. Okay, efficiency can be incorporated into all three. So let's start with the zoning code. Once the steering committee has done their work and they presented the comprehensive plan to the governing board, and presumably the governing board adopts the comprehensive plan, the next step is for the governing board to appoint what's called a land use review committee. Again, including a diverse mix of planning board members, stakeholders, and citizens. And the function of the land use review committee is to look at the existing zoning code and make sure that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. Okay, there may be some zoning changes needed. For example, if there are shared facilities contemplated in the comprehensive plan, perhaps there need to be zoning changes to allow multi-use facilities rather than single-use facilities. I don't know, but that needs to be addressed and, if necessary, changed. And it is changed through local law to amend the zoning code. In terms of financial planning, really what we want to do is we want to identify sources of funding for projects, whether that funding comes from cash flow generated by the municipality or reserves or outside sources, including grants and contributions and so on and so forth. Then what we want to do is we want to model the cost savings from shared services. So it's really a question of a before and after scenario. Before, if you have two highway departments, what does that look like versus having a consolidated highway department, for example. And you can directly model those using financial planning, and I'll show you how in a few minutes. And of course, you want to measure the impact on your overall budget of shared services, specifically the impact on property taxes, as property taxes are the difference between revenues and expenditures. Excuse me. So we use the process of cash flow forecasting in order to model financial planning. And that involves collecting prior data, usually 5 years, financial results, looking at the average growth rate in each function, each service, and then using that growth rate, projecting into the future to see what your cash flow looks like over the next 5 years. Very simple exercise, easy to do, and absolutely necessary in terms of knowing where the money's going to come from to fund, short to medium term actions that are identified in the implementation matrix. Of course, you can always make changes to the assumptions for your 5-year projection. If you think inflation rate is going up, you can certainly adjust the rate of growth. Or if you contemplate a near-term change in revenues and expenditures, you can incorporate that. So it's very flexible. We also want to look at capital investment planning, the third planning document. This is the one where you're planning for maintenance and eventual replacement of big ticket capital items. Again, you want to look at your operating budget, surplus and shortfall. And we all know that cumulative surpluses can be used to build reserves, and cumulative deficits deplete reserves. Generally, a reserve account is used to smooth operations over time. So if you have a bad year one year, you can use reserves from a good year, a prior year, in order to make up the shortfall, so you don't have to adjust your property tax rate every year just to account for, say, an especially snowy season, which requires more than usual plowing. However, reserves should also be sufficient to cover ongoing maintenance of your capital investments. Water treatment plants, sewer treatment plants require ongoing maintenance, and too often this is neglected or pasted over, and with the result that the useful life is shortened and it just costs more in the long run. Large-term capital investments are usually replaced with a bonding, perhaps, for a wastewater treatment plant or sewer treatment plant. But other big ticket items, such as highway machinery, are bought with cash, and so we have to make sure we have enough reserves to contemplate replacing, say, fire truck or road paving machinery, and so on. So the sources, whether it's immediate cash flow or reserves, and the timing of those items determine what long-term actions in the implementation matrix can be undertaken and when. Okay, so data sources, very simple. The Office of the State Controller publishes what's called Open Book New York. You can go directly to www.openbookny.com, or you can go through the State Controller's website. But it contains all spending data and revenue data for local governments in New York State. This comes from the annual update document, which has to be filed by municipalities every year. And it's filed with the Office of the State Controller, and they make this information public. So you see on the left-hand side, local government spending. And if you were to click on that, you would get a screen that looks like this, data search. Okay. And you have a variety of things you can choose from: property tax cap, revenues and expenditures, tax limit, balance sheet, and debt. What we want to look at initially is revenues and expenditures. So you click on that little button. We want to look at a trend over time because we're doing a 5-year look back, if you recall. And if you click submit, you'll get a trend report screen that looks like this. It asks you to select a class of local government. And by class of local government, we mean city, town, village, or what have you. And for each class, the name of the local government, every name of local government is included for that class in New York State. So you just click on the drop down and it'll find your town or your village, depending on the class. You can select up to 6 years of information. We generally go with 5 years. Submit again, and you get a report that looks like this. This is just the beginning of the report. You know, it's very, very detailed. This is 5 years of information for my town. It's broken down by function. In this case, the first function is, this is a revenue, charges for services. And you'll see the OSC codes and the fund code there. A is general fund. The OSC code here for charges for services is 2, I guess, 2190. There is an individual code for each function. You'll see general government fees under there. The OSC code for general government starts with 1, so that's how it's allocated. And then, of course, the other side of the coin are the expenditures, and same thing. Very detailed information you can find broken down to the individual level. You'll notice that there's actually a 5th digit on the OSC codes, and that tells you whether it's a personal services, that's 0.1, whether it's a contractual expenditure, 0.4, and so on. You can also get balance sheet information. Just go back to the tab I showed you before, click on balance sheet. You'll only get to choose 1 year. That's fine. Again, select the class of government, the name of the local government, submit, and that's what you get. So this tells you how much is reserved in the general fund, the A fund. Also, other governmental funds, such as special revenue funds, CM, I think, is community funds. Highway, of course, DA, and in this case, there's a small lighting district in the hamlet, which accounts for the small number there. And then at the bottom, you can see the reserves. In this case, they are restricted, which means they are put aside for a specific purpose. They're not there just to be spent. Frankly, I don't know what is being reserved for, but given the size of the town, there's a fair amount of restricted assets. I'm assuming there's contemplation of funding a larger ticket item out of those reserves. Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, John Demarest, and he's going to give you some examples, some real-life examples of planning for government efficiency that we have incorporated into the local government efficiency program. And so, John, why don't you take it over? I will stop sharing my screen and.
Joe.
Yes.
Did you get my?
All right, let me just get this up here. All right. Earlier in the presentation, Chris had mentioned that there were 3 different types of intermunicipal cooperation. Do anybody remember that, what those 3 are? If you do, could you just put them in the chat and we'll see what people remember, because we're going to go over an example of each one of those as we move forward. So if you can remember the 3 different things, add them to the chat and we'll then move forward. I'll give everybody a second here to do that if they know it. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to talk about 3 different areas of the budget that tend to be making up a larger share of the budgets for municipalities. The first one we're going to talk about is public safety. Now, public safety can include, just change this view here. Okay. Sorry about that. Public safety, again, makes up one of the larger portions of a budget usually, includes law enforcement, traffic and animal control, fire protection, are just some of the different areas. Now, Chris had been mentioning just a second ago before the OSC codes, which can be, here's some of the main topics are, 3110 is sheriff, 3120 for police, 3310 is traffic control, 3410 fire protection, 3510 animal control. And under each of these things it'll be broken down a little more to split up what the separate costs are along the way. Okay, so we'll go down to the next one here. So what we're looking to do when people are working in the public safety areas, they're looking to provide reductions in public safety expenditures to municipalities across the state as they make changes to their current structures. We at the Department of State work with a lot of municipalities that are trying to merge or dissolve certain departments. One very popular area is fire departments. You may have a municipality that has 2 or 3 or 4 different fire districts, each district with their own equipment, with their own chief and other such officers that are in there. Police departments are merging. So what you can do and what we work with them, these municipalities, and help them do and provide some funds for them is a town with 4 fire departments may say, we want to reduce this down to 1 to share some costs, get away from the duplication of owning certain types of equipment. And now the 4 districts may be joined in together to become 1. Now you're going to have 1 fire chief that will oversee all 4 districts, and other senior members of the fire departments will hold the senior positions. But now, instead of 3 of the 4 wanting to have a ladder truck, maybe only 1 of the old districts will have a ladder truck, and other specialized equipment, can be spread out amongst the different departments or districts because they're now under 1 department. And now you're getting rid of the duplication of who's owning what, because now it's all under 1 roof. It can be shared amongst the 3 throughout the entire municipality. The example we're going to talk about is the village of Rouse's Point. This is a village up in Clinton County. They had 1 officer in their police department, and which again then means you're only getting part-time police coverage from the village police department. I think they were doing 5 or 6 days a week, and you weren't even getting a full 8 hours a day out of it. So what they decided to do was to merge or dissolve their police department with the Clinton County Sheriff Department. Now, this data right here is out of the Open Book New York that Chris just talked to. It makes it very easy to understand what they're doing and how this affected them. They started this merger in 2017, and this is a complex merger. It's not something that's done easily and quickly. So as you can see, in 2016, the public safety budget for the village was $310,000, which made up almost 29% made up a large portion of their budget. The police departments was almost $90,000, which made up almost 29% of the overall public safety budget. So in 2017, the merger started. You saw a slight decrease in the police department, but at the same time, they were able to see a large drop in the overall public safety budget. But the police department still now is making up 38% of the budget. So in 2018, the 1 police officer for the village now became a member of the sheriff department after taking the multiple tests and passing the safety and other pieces there. Assets were turned over. The police cars were rebranded to be sheriff's offices, sheriff cars. The police office in Rouse's Point became a substation for the Clinton County Sheriff now, so that they could have a place to maintain presence. But within Rouse's Point, once all this started making, you can see that their public safety budget was going down a little, but more importantly, their expenditures for the police department went from 83,000 down to 22,000. So instead of 38% of their public safety budget, it only made up 10.5%. And moving forward in the years moving beyond and closer to where we are now, you can see the next year went down to 8,500, and last year was just barely over $7,000. And right now, police expenditures are only making up 3.3% of the overall public safety budget. But in using Open Book New York, when you look at the information, you can see in 2019, there was a large jump in the public safety budget. And going through the data that you can pull out and download from Open Book, it's very easy to figure out why. And when I looked down just a little bit below the police department, it showed that there was a large jump in fire protection capital expenditures that year. So that means either they had to do repairs to a fire department building or they bought a new truck. Now, if everybody can take a look and tell me what was the functional, or I'm giving away the answer, what kind of intermunicipal cooperation was this? So if you could just put that in the, answer that in the chat if you can, if you can remember what it was. I'll give you a second. Right, with someone saying consolidation, yes. What this is a functional consolidation. Now, basically what's happening is the village is contracting with the Clinton County Sheriff Office to provide the service that they did themselves once, part-time. It was something that wasn't out of the realm of what the Sheriff's Office was doing, because when the police officer in the village was off duty, a lot of the responsibilities now turned to the Sheriff's Office anyway. So it was just a slight expanding of what they were doing. The next area we're going to talk about is infrastructure. Again, this can be another large portion of any municipal budget and will include such things as water and sewer, sanitation, electric and power, are just some of the areas that you can watch this fall under. And now some of the OSC codes, again, that we were talking about earlier, they have one for sewer administration that can be broken down to, amongst other things, will be how the, your pipes that are in the ground, repair, areas like that. There's refuge and garbage, it has its own. Water administration is its own heading, and electric power falls under its own heading as well. Now, as a lot of people I'm sure know and have faced in their municipalities, in many cases across the state, the cost of development or replacing new or existing infrastructures can be really cost prohibitive to small municipalities to undertake, even with the help you can get from the state or federal sources. To repair a wastewater treatment plant, or if you get to the point where you have to build a brand new one, this can cost 20, 30, 40 million dollars, depending on the size and how much of a change you have to make to it. And for a lot of small municipalities, if you have 500 ratepayers in your municipality, how do you afford a 30 or 40 million dollar project? Even when you bond it out over 30 years, you're looking at rate increases for the municipality members of thousands of dollars per year. So what I wanted to point to is a project that we're working on with the village of Hewelton in St. Lawrence County. They've received funding from us through one of our programs, and they're also working with the Northern Border Regional Commission program. Received a grant from there last year that the Department of State also helps to administer here in New York. Now, the village of Hewelton had a wastewater treatment facility that had reached its full capacity. This was causing issues within the village. They couldn't expand current businesses. There was one food processing business within the village that wanted to develop another line of products, but didn't have the ability to because the waste that would come out of that could not be increased. So they could not do that. There was a second food processing facility within the village that had been abandoned a few years ago, and the village wanted to market that facility as a potential use for somebody else to come into the village and operate there. But again, because there was no capacity for additional wastewater, there was no way for them to move forward with that. A couple years prior, the city of Ogdensburg, which is just down the road from the village, recently upgraded their wastewater treatment facility, and they were currently operating well below capacity. I think the city was operating at about 50%, 60% of the capacity of the treatment plant. So the village got money from the Department of State. They used that money to do a feasibility study and start to do design work. And instead of upgrading their own wastewater treatment facility and having to replace most of it, they determined it was more feasible and more cost effective for them to place a 7-mile sewer line running from the village to the Ogdensburg facility. That allowed them to decommission their existing facility, and given the costs, $20–30 million to develop a new wastewater treatment facility of their own, or put in a 7-mile line, which the going rate was somewhere around $1 million per mile. So you're looking at $7 to $8 million total for the project, a little more depending on the cost, some of the extra work that had to go into it. And since COVID, I don't know what the cost of a mile of sewer main would be now, how much it's gone up. But either way, it was much more cost effective for the village to tie in with the city of Ogdensburg. And along the way, the village was part of another town, which name I did not include because I can't pronounce it. So they were also able to tie into the sewer line. So now you've got multiple municipalities tying into this new sewer line that's going to the city of Ogdensburg, who has a brand new facility that is fully functional and has plenty of capacity to handle everything from there. This will now allow the village to have their one food processing facility to expand as they wanted, and it allows them to market the existing facility that's not being used to try to bring in more business to the village. Now, this project was an example of, can anybody tell me what that is through the chat? Anyone on this? All right, this is a perfect example of a shared service. You've got the towns working together to provide the service. It's not that everybody can now access along the way, and will help strengthen the village and the town in their ability to grow and move forward with their economy. The final piece that we're going to talk about is employee benefits. This is another area that can take up quite a portion of your municipal budget, and it's going to cover such expenditures as retirement programs, workers' compensation, life, disability, and medical insurance. And some of the OSC codes that fall under employee benefits are for state retirement. There's one for local retirement funds, Social Security, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, hospital and medical and dental insurance. Now, the area that we're going to focus on right now would be hospital and medical insurance. This is an area that everybody knows has seen expenses go up quite a bit in the last 10 to 20 years. and becomes harder and harder for municipalities to provide the insurance that their employees need. Some organizations now have gone to the point where, such as a county, or in the area where I live in Albany, ABOCES has created these healthcare consortiums to help lower the costs to their members through bulk coverage. As Chris had mentioned earlier, the more that you're buying under one roof, the cheaper the prices usually become. So the example that we're going to talk about is Tompkins County. This is in the Finger Lakes area, where they created one of these healthcare consortiums. And one of the local municipalities within the region, the village of Watkins Glen, joined this consortium along with many other municipalities and municipal organizations to help lower their costs. The consortium started, the village went to start working with Tompkins County in 2017 to provide medical insurance to its employees. So again, this information is coming from Open Books New York, and you can see in the last 4 years, when you get to 2016, you're looking at almost 34% of employee benefits was coming from medical insurance costs. In 2017, we see a top out at overall employee benefits were at $919,000, of which $317,000 was coming from medical insurance alone. This is made up 35.5% of the employee benefit budget. So this is the year when the village started working with Tompkins County to join the consortium. So as we move forward, in 2018, you see a drop in overall benefits, employee benefits to the village cost. And you can see a big chunk of that was a $40,000 drop in medical insurance. And this reduced the percentage now from 34.5 to 30 and almost 31%, just under 31%. In 2019, the medical insurance cost went down a little bit more. In 2020, it dropped another over $40,000 a year to the village. So between 2017 to 2019, you're looking at an $80,000 approximately drop in medical insurance costs per year. And now medical insurance is making up only 25% of the overall employee benefit price for the village versus what was almost 35%, 34.5% back at its peak in 2017. Again, as you look at it in 2019, there was a jump in employee benefits because you'll look at the number and say, well, if this is going down, why does this jump? And again, you can look with the Open Book New York information and just go down a little bit under 2019. And you can see that there was an unclassified employee benefits increase for electric and power employees that year. What that is, I don't know. It did start to drop again the next year, so maybe it was a one-time expenditure along the way. But again, you've just seen that. Now this is an example of a cooperative agreement. Again, one of the three. So now we've done all three types of intermunicipal cooperations that Chris had mentioned earlier: cooperative agreements, shared services, and functional consolidations. Next, we're going to move on to the local government efficiency program. And I hope that all of you are familiar with this program. It has been with the Department of State for almost 20 years, I believe it is. And some of the programs under the LGE, the newest one is the Countywide Shared Service Initiative. I hope that everybody's municipality has been involved to some extent in the process of developing these countywide shared service plans. And what happens under this program was a cash match has been provided to municipalities for savings that they realized within the calendar year that the plan is taking place. Other parts of the LG programs include the Local Government Efficiency Grant Program, which is a $4 million a year program, and the Citizens Reorganization and Empowerment Grant, or CREG grant program, which also comes with the Citizens Empowerment Tax Credits for villages and towns that when you see they merge, the village will dissolve into the town. We'll go into a little more information on each. The countywide shared service initiative was created and implemented in 2017. It was available to every county across the state except for the 5 counties that make up New York City. Each county was required to bring together a panel of municipal leaders throughout the county to develop this shared service plan and come up with an estimate of cost savings that you can realize. And then if you implemented the plan and implemented some of the projects and came back and said, well, we ended up saving $100,000 to some of the municipalities within the county, you would submit that to the Department of State. It would review the projects and forward its recommendation as to these savings are accurate and they should be reimbursed, and it would get reviewed again, and eventually the municipalities would each see their portion of the savings returned to them. And then right now this program is presently set to expire in 2021. So this is the last year that the plans are being put together. There was an effort to try to expand it during the budget. It wasn't done at that time, but there still is some kinds of discussion, and we'll see in the future if this program will be expanded or not and allowed to keep going forward. You can see here a list of the different types of projects that the municipalities were applying for. The biggest, the most projects were under the shared equipment and personnel and services area. So this is sharing highway equipment, anything along those lines. You can see again, transportation and highway departments. Records management is, you can see, was the smallest area, or one of the smallest areas. Government reorganization, so this is merging departments within governments, merging governments. You could be sharing court space with multiple municipalities. Again, that's one of the areas. And the first one, we were talking about public health, had a number of them. And you also see a lot of projects under the water and sewer, wastewater management systems are being undertaken. These are large cost areas. So some of the larger cost areas seem to get the most projects listed. The LGE grant program, this is the annual program that the Department of State runs in the Office of Local Governments. There are 2 types of grants you can apply for through this funding. There's planning grants and implementation grants. A planning grant, each municipality can receive $12,500 in the grant, up to $100,000 per project. So this means you can have 8 different municipalities working together on a planning grant to determine some way that you're going to provide shared services. The planning grant, it's a requirement of the match is 50-50. This is just to make sure that everybody is serious about doing the planning grants and not just saying, well, it's a good idea, let's take a look at it. But our hope is that these planning grants are going to eventually move on to implementation. The implementation portion of the program, each municipality can apply and receive up to $200,000, and the project can be for up to $1 million. So now you can have 5 different municipalities involved in the implementation project. The match here, it's a 90-10 split, so you only have to provide 10% of the project cost as the local funds. This lower match is an incentive. We like to see the majority of our projects come in as implementation projects. You know, if they all come in at $1 million, we're only going to be doing a few a year, but they come in at various levels. We usually do probably 8 to 10 projects a year out of this program. Last year, this program was not funded, along with a lot of programs across the state, unfortunately. But this year, hopefully everything will be funded, and hopefully soon we'll be seeing whether or not these are coming out and when they'll become available. People who can apply to the LG program include towns, villages, cities, counties, school districts, BOCES, certain libraries, and special districts within the municipalities, such as fire districts, water or sewer districts, are all eligible applicants. The expenses that we'll cover are transitional salaries. So we're not going to pay a full-time employee's full salary. We will pay part of the salary for someone who is working on a project, just only the portion of their time there. If you hire additional personnel to solely work on the project, we can pay for those people. We'll pay for travel expenses, supplies and materials, contractual expenses, equipment expenses, and capital costs. The other program that we run is the Citizens Reorganization Empowerment Grant, or CREG program. This is a smaller program. And again, this program was not funded last year, and we're still waiting to hear whether or not we're going to be able to release the RFA on this program. But you're allowed to get up to $100,000 maximum per project. Now, the way that is split up is it's $50,000 for a study or a plan. If you are in the position where you need to do this in an expedited fashion, you can apply for up to $25,000 for the funds with a petitioned local government. And then you can go for a $50,000 implementation grant for municipal reorganization. Now, a lot of these grants are going out towards when a village decides to dissolve and become part of the town. They may hire a consultant and submit an application to do a plan or study. And what they'll do is develop the consultant will work with them, or the municipality may on their own work on it and develop a dissolution plan as to how assets will be transferred, how services will be transferred to the town, just so there's a smooth transition. And then once the plan is put together, it goes before the village board, and the village board will either adopt or say no to it. And if they do adopt it, then it goes to a referendum. So the people of the village will then vote on it. And if the majority of people say they want to dissolve, it will go forward. If the majority of people say no, then it won't, and it'll be on hold for a few years before you're able to reapply. If you do decide to adopt the dissolution plan, you can then apply for a grant of up to $50,000 to implement this. So this may be transferring special districts to towns from the village, could be redoing village laws and working them into the town laws. Anything along those lines. We're talking about highway and road plowing, who's going to do what. And it's all there, and the support is provided to make sure there's a smooth transition, and the people living in the village aren't going to lose any services when the town takes over. Other types of grants that we fund through here, sometimes municipalities, as they grow, they may create new water or sewer districts to the point where after 10, 20 years, you have 10, 15 water districts and sewer districts. And as they get paid off, all of a sudden you're still creating 10, 15 different kind of bills for each district. So you can get a grant to help consolidate those districts. So to make it more efficient for the government, it's not going to save you much money, but it saves the municipality much more time and much more efficient way to run by getting one district or two districts that can just send out the same bill. As we mentioned earlier, there's also fire departments that merge, that get grants under this program, and other municipal functions. Other things that you can get from the Department of State and the local government office is, we will share other local government experiences. as you talk about and think about, do I want to dissolve the village? Do I want to merge fire departments? And you start to talk to us, we can get you in touch with other municipalities who've gone through the same thing. Sometimes we're allowed to share work plans and budgets so you can see exactly how they spent their money and the steps that they had to go through. You can look at the results of completed projects. We can talk to you about those, provide you case study information. There are publications put together within the department on different topic areas. In our group, the Local Government Efficiency Group, we spend a lot of time going out and visiting with the towns and villages and talking directly with you as you're making a plan and you're getting some people together from the municipality within the town or village and saying, can you come out and attend this meeting with us? We're happy to come out and look at what you're putting together and provide whatever assistance we can or make recommendations on certain ways to do things. And then financial analysis of some of the shared services that you may be looking at and how you can move forward there and are things cost beneficial. That's the end of what Chris and I were here to talk about. And what I'd like to do now is turn it back over to Jason and see if there's any questions that we can answer for you.
Thank you, John, and Chris, so much for that presentation. There was great information in there. We did have at least one question. The county I live in has a self-funded health plan. Is that considered a consortium? I'm not terribly familiar with that. My sense is no, but Chris or John, do you have any?
Yeah, I can handle that one. Yeah, counties are allowed to self-finance or self-insure rather. And that is usually because there's a minimum requirement for self-insurance, and that's under Article 47, that's 2,000 employees, and counties are large enough generally to do that. But the counties are not allowed to, or under a county plan, municipalities are not allowed to join that. Okay. I know there has been some desire for local governments to join a county plan, but under current law, it's not permitted. So my short answer is no, it's not a healthcare consortium. Rather, it's just a county self-insured plan.
And that's, thank you, Chris. Yeah, and that maybe is a little bit confusing about the Tompkins County Consortium. I worked for a municipality in Tompkins County last year, and so I was part of that as an employee. And it's not, I don't believe the county itself participates. It's a consortium of municipalities initially within Tompkins County, but as your example shows, Watkins Glen and Schuyler County participates, and Harriet from Seneca County mentioned in the chat window that Seneca County municipalities participate as well. So I think that's a great example for other parts of the state to look at in terms of health insurance. The data from Watkins Glen was dramatic that you showed in terms of cost savings there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no prohibition against a healthcare consortium expanding into neighboring counties. And that's why you see the Tompkins County Health Care Consortium expanding into adjacent Cortland County. Yeah, there is a difference between a county self-insured plan and a healthcare consortium, which is organized under Article 47 of state finance law.
Great. We had another question and comment from Edmund. This is a great one, actually, because I wanted to highlight this point as well. Many municipalities do not have a human resources department, especially small ones, and I can attest to that, having worked for a town of 3,600 people. The town clerk is usually the go-to person. One of the many hats they wear is to is HR, safety coordinators, training coordinators. The question is, what is needed to get multiple municipalities to take part in a shared human resource person used by many municipality? And same question for safety coordinators or training coordinators.
That's a great question. I like that one. The town clerk is kind of a unique position in that, is it elected? I can't remember.
It is.
Yeah. So, that would be a difficult one to share, just given the nature of how the position is filled. But any other personnel working in the office certainly can be shared with other towns. If there's a budget officer, there's no reason that a budget officer has to work for one particular municipality. That job can be shared. Assessors can be shared. It's all permitted under Article 5G of General Municipal Law. So by all means, go ahead. I encourage you to do so. The only caveat being that elected positions cannot be shared.
In a lot of municipalities, especially the smaller rural ones, you can see a lot of the village employees also have the same job with the towns that the village is located within. So basically, they're being shared between the village and the town anyway. So, because it just makes sense, because neither of them are really what you would call full-time positions, most likely. So you can split that up. For the employee, it's good because now you are generating a full-time position between the multiple municipalities along the way. One of the other areas that we see is becoming a very popular way to share these services is in the IT area. For a lot of small villages and towns, you only have one or two computers in there. So you're not going to hire your own IT person. You may or may not hire a consultant to do it, but a lot of places now you can see counties are providing that service to the towns and villages. So the county will make sure your computers are set up. They're going to get your software on there. And some of the benefits there is, especially along the accounting areas, they'll make sure everybody's running on the same platform, the same software. So now when you have to share financial information or other information that you're storing on the computer, everything's in the same format. It makes it very easy to share the information. Because before that, I had talked to people in counties and they say, well, when the towns report their finances to us, they're using this system and we basically have to manually re-enter it all into our own system, which costs a lot of time and there's really no reason for it. So by working together, you can make sure everybody's using the same equipment, the same software, and it's going to make the transitional flow of information work much faster and much more efficiently. And you're going to save money within the villages of town because you don't need your own IT guy or IT person, because with two computers, what are they going to do all day?
No, that's a great segue, John. A great point. One topic I wanted to hit on was website maintenance. Most citizens nowadays expect even, the most rural town or village to have a website with times of meetings and some basic information on it. And I think the past year especially has shown us that is becoming indispensable to have. And it's a real struggle, having worked for a town of 3,600 people that was pretty well resourced. It was still, that's a time commitment to make sure the website is kept up to date. And it often falls on, a town board member that might be interested, or it's kind of given to the town clerk who may not have time or expertise to do it. And I would love to see more municipalities sort of pooling resources and hiring, sort of a website maintenance person to do multiple websites and maybe be a little more efficient in some of that work. So
that's right. I mean, if you hired a good webmaster who knows what they're doing, in most cases working for an individual municipality, how many updates are you putting on your website a day for them to to warrant being a full-time employee. But if you can hire someone who's talented and good, and you share them amongst all the municipalities within the region, one, it's going to keep the guy busy, the person busy enough to want to stay at the job. And now everybody's got somebody that knows what they're doing. And you know that your website will be kept up, will look professional, and will be working all the time.
And that applies to all sorts of back office operations. Payroll is another one, you know, which is better shared across multiple municipalities than each individual municipality, you know, separately billing and so on and so forth. It's a big time consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's after 1. I'm able to keep chatting as long as people have questions. I'm not seeing any more at this point. I just wanted to hit on a couple more points. Genesee Finger Lakes worked with Department of State, specifically Chris, on an interesting shared zoning services project in Wyoming County in our region to take the zoning enforcement from the local level to the county level. And Wyoming County is one of only, I believe, 2 counties in New York State that for decades now has done building code enforcement at the county level. And they decided to also move into doing zoning code enforcement at the county level. And it's been a really interesting project. Unfortunately, COVID, you know, prevented it from, I think, reaching its full potential. But please get in touch with me if any folks have questions on that. I'd love to share what we learned, and maybe we can do a session on that specifically for the fall local government workshop, because I think it's a really innovative way to you know, share services and just bring the level of service to what I think a lot of folks are expecting this day and age. You know, with the county doing the zoning enforcement, they're there Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, answering phones and email. Whereas in a lot of rural towns and small villages, you know, it's a part-time person and they're working evenings, and it's not always easy to get in touch with them. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And then I guess the last point I want to make today is, you know, we've seen a number of village dissolutions over the past few years, and I personally, I have, you know, my own thoughts on it. I think in some cases it makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure it's always the best way to go. I'm very interested in looking more at town consolidations, especially you know, two rural towns next to each other that may have less than 1,000 people each. You know, very similar cultures, very similar, you know, landscapes and land uses. There was a study done in St. Lawrence County a few years ago with 2 towns that came very close to consolidating. They ended up not proceeding, at least not yet, but that's something I'd really like to explore more, especially in the Genesee Finger Lakes region, and just say that, you know, we're here. The Regional Planning Council is a resource for any municipality that's interested in even just chatting informally about it. What are the options? You know, please feel free to reach out to us. And we work closely with Department of State and can put you in touch with the right folks there. And I'll be curious to see what amongst those programs might get funded in this next round of grant funding, Chris and John. So I'll be looking forward to that to see what our municipalities might be able to tap into.
Okay, great. Look forward to it.
With a year off, I'm expecting to see a lot of applications come in.
I bet. So last question in the chat room. Yes, we will be we're still working out the details of the certificates, but we'll be giving one for, you stuck it out for an hour and a half today, which is great. So we'll be giving an hour and a half of credit for folks that stayed. And we'll be doing that by email. Again, still working out the logistical details, but don't worry, we have you recorded as attending, and you'll be getting that within possibly a week or 2. But like I said, we're working on it. With that, thank you. A big thank you to Chris and John for presenting today. This was really great. Much appreciation to our partners at Department of State. And any last words, gentlemen?
I don't think so. I'm I thank you, Jason. And, you know, I think you're doing great work out there. And thank you for everyone for attending and listening. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you very much.
Great, great. Well, thanks again. And that's all for today, folks. Have a great rest of your day. And please feel free to contact me with any questions or comments. Have a
Great.
good day.
Thanks. Bye, Jason.
Bye-bye.
Bye.